welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from a real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 101. This is the Week 5 recap episode where the Detroit Lions came all the way down I-75, made the trip with all their fans into Paycor Stadium. The Lions fans invaded what was supposed to be the Bengals' Stripe the Jungle game and put a damper on everything. Looked like about 25% of the crowd was blue instead of orange and black, and they beat the Bengals for their third straight loss, this one coming in front of the home crowd. Lions 37, Bengals 24. And that final score is very deceiving because this game was not even as close as that 13-point differential would suggest. There was a moment as the fourth quarter began where the Lions were ahead 28-3. 25-point lead going into the fourth quarter of the game. It felt very reminiscent of the previous two Bengals games where nothing was going their way. Jake Browning was throwing horrible interception after horrible interception, each one worse than the last. It wasn't even like, oh, bad luck, somebody hit his arm, it got tipped. No, it was like he was trying to throw it directly to the Lions, and every time he threw, which was a lot, Zac Taylor, the head coach, did not do any favors to Jake Browning with the play calling. He didn't give him any support in terms of running the football. There was one moment early in the game where I was keeping track of how many passes versus how many runs the Bengals had committed to in their offense. And I think it was like 17 passes to 5 runs early on in the game, which is obviously not great balance for Jake Browning, the quarterback, who, as we have seen, he's played in 4 games this season, and after this Lions game, he's got 8 interceptions. Jumping ahead to after the game in the post-game press conference, Jake Browning was very apologetic and sounded very depressed that he had thrown another 3 interceptions in a game. They lost this time instead of the Jacksonville game where he threw 3 interceptions, and they won. Didn't get lucky this time. Lions didn't let him off the hook. And so he was like, yeah, basically saying the game was his fault. You know, you're not going to win any games in the NFL if you have your quarterback throwing 3 interceptions. So what this team needs more than anything is better quarterback play from me, and there's no hiding from it. And so he was saying, nothing that you could disagree with, really. He was saying, like, yeah, I played bad today, and that's why we lost. And, like, who am I to disagree with Jake Browning? Yeah, you're probably right, Jake Browning. You did not play very well. But, I am going to have to back off of my Jake Browning defense. I was strong in my Jake Browning defense, and I can't really defend him anymore after all these interceptions. But, remarkably, there were at least something, I can't really say to cheer about, but, they scored 24 points in the game. They scored 3 touchdowns, which was, 3 more than they scored the week before. So I guess you call it steps in the right direction, but Jamar Chase scored 2 touchdowns in this game. Great touchdowns. They were amazing plays on both of these. And the first touchdown especially, it was when they were already losing 28-3. It's the start of the fourth quarter. It was the first play of the fourth quarter. They had driven it all the way down the field to end the third quarter. It was a crazy play where Jamar motioned into the backfield off to the left. They snapped the ball, and I think it was about, I want to say it was like 15, 20 yards. I guess I could look it up. But, okay, 15-yard touchdown pass. So Jamar lines up in the backfield. Jake Browning gets the snap. He doesn't like what he sees initially, and he starts to scramble around to his right. Jamar Chase at this point has made his way over to the middle of the field, and now it's just a scramble drill. Jamar Chase has the instincts to go towards the back right corner of the end zone. He almost runs into T. Higgins. For whatever reason, T. Higgins is going the opposite direction. T is going to the middle of the field. Jamar Chase crosses with him. They almost collide. Chase goes to the back right corner of the end zone. Andre Iosivas is like running around in the back of the end zone, not getting separation from his guy. He's not getting himself open. For whatever reason, Jake Browning decides he's going to go for this miracle pass over two defenders in front of another defender after he's already thrown 3 interceptions. Fading away, it looks like an ill-advised pass. And then somehow it goes through all the Lions defenders' arms. Jamar Chase catches it in the back of the end zone, but then he runs off to the side. And I'm thinking, okay, well, good catch, but there's no way that he was able to get both of his feet down. It's going to be an incomplete pass. And then after a second, the referee is standing right there. He looks at Jamar Chase. He sees that he completed the catch, didn't bobble it or anything like that, and he puts his hands up to signal touchdown. I'm like, what? There's no way that was a touchdown. So then obviously they go back, they show it in slow motion, instant replay. I've gone back and watched this on multiple angles. I've watched this play multiple times. First of all, the throw was insane by Jake Browning. There's no way he should probably have even attempted to throw this pass, especially after he's already thrown 3 interceptions in this game. The catch was probably equally as amazing by Jamar Chase, that he had the awareness to get his front foot down before he went out of bounds. He got the toes in, everything, no part of his foot was touching the sideline, but also he did an amazing job of dragging his trailing foot behind him to get 2 feet in bounds, grabbed it with his hands before he went out. Amazing play. They looked at it under review. Good. So that was incredible. The second touchdown also came in the fourth quarter. At that point, the Bengals were losing, 28-10. Still seemed unlikely they were going to be able to come back. But then they got... Okay, I take it back. Oh, no, I was right. 28-10 at that point. Then they forced a 3-and-out punt by the Lions. Great. They are able to score another touchdown on the next drive. This drive was a weird, inauspicious start. So they got a 10-yard run on 1st and 10 from their own 30-yard line by Samaje Perine. I think it was one of their longest runs of the day. And it's weird that Samaje Perine hasn't gotten more of an opportunity to run the ball. He's actually had maybe a little bit more success running than Chase Brown. I know they want to give Chase Brown every opportunity to be their lead running back, but in this game, Chase Brown had 8 carries for 27 yards, average of 3.4, and a long of 6. Jake Browning was actually the leading rusher for the Bengals, which isn't a good sign, but he had 4 carries for 31 yards on the day, long of 13. And then Samaje Perine, 4 carries, 27, long of 10. So Samaje Perine had 27 yards, same as Chase Brown, but with half the number of carries. But anyway, in this fourth quarter, Bengals are down 28-10. They get the ball back. They try to do a flea flicker, which is a kind of a trick play where the quarterback hands the ball off to the running back. They take it for about 1 or 2 steps, fake like they're going to run up into the line of scrimmage, then turn around, pitch the ball back to the quarterback so that he can then throw the ball further downfield. It's a play meant to trick the defense to come up and stop the run, tackle the running back, but that draws them up so you can throw it over the top. In theory, that's all great, and apparently they had T. Higgins wide open running down the field if Jake Browning were able to throw it to him. Unfortunately, in all this amount of time where they're doing the fake and the throw it back, Orlando Brown Jr. has lost his matchup around the outside, let the defender go right around him for a strip sack on Jake Browning. He's not able to even think about throwing it by the time he gets sacked. Luckily, the Bengals are able to miraculously fall on this and recover it. It was recovered by Orlando Brown Jr. So he, I guess, knew this was coming because he gave up the sack to Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson was all over Jake Browning in this game. And I have to check how many sacks he actually recorded because he had a number of sacks that were called back by penalty. I think he had at least 2 that were negated. One, he lined up offside, and another one, there was a defensive holding down the field. He had 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, Aiden Hutchinson. The Lions only had 2 sacks all day compared to the Bengals, 4 sacks on the day. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Bengals, after the flea flicker, it's like, holy crap, that was probably the worst flea flicker I've ever seen in my life. 2 plays later, it's 3rd and 14. They complete a 64-yard touchdown pass where Ja'Marr Chase, I don't know what the guy was thinking about on this play. I'll have to go back and watch to see who was guarding him. But it was, at this point, the Lions had like their 5th and 6th string practice squad defensive backs in the game. They had a number of injuries. Terrion Arnold went out injured. He's going to go on injured reserve. They had DJ Reed was another defensive back, outside cornerback for the Lions, has gone on injured reserve. They're really playing with a number of backups in the defensive secondary, but maybe that's the reason why this guy let Ja'Marr Chase get so wide open. He bit on the short in route, and apparently that was something that the coaches had seen up in the press box. In certain coverages, if we run a certain type of route, they might bite on this. So Ja'Marr Chase did a good job giving the guy a double move, fake short, go long, and he was wide open. And it was, a good pass to hit Ja'Marr Chase in stride. But honestly, I could have thrown this touchdown pass. He was so wide open. The first touchdown pass to Ja'Marr Chase was an amazing throw by Jake Browning. This one, like I said, I could have thrown this. It was so easy. But that made it a little bit more interesting to bring it to 28-17 Lions. At that point, let's see how much time was left. At that point, there was 10 minutes left to go, a little bit over 10 minutes left to go, 11-point lead for the Lions. And so at that brief moment in time, they had been down 28-3. David Montgomery had a passing touchdown. He had a running touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs had a running touchdown. Really, in the first half, the Lions mostly had their way. Trey Hendrickson got a strip sack fumble on Jared Goff when it looked like they were about to score some more points. Defense was able to get a stop on the Lions. They got multiple stops. It was just that in the first half, the Bengals offense could not really muster much of an attack, and it was a hot day in Cincinnati. It was over 80 degrees by the time this game kicked off, and so the defense was on the field for so much. It started to feel like maybe halfway through that third quarter, they were on the field a little bit too much, and they started to get worn down. Those big guys out there running around, they're going to be sweating, running out of energy when they don't have much time to break. So that was kind of the thing. They were tough early on, but in this fourth quarter, they couldn't stand up. They gave up a long touchdown drive to the Lions, who went back up 35-17, putting it more out of reach. But to their credit, Bengals come back with their third touchdown drive in a row, 8 plays, 63 yards. This one, the biggest play on this was a 30-yard pass over the middle to Andre Iosivas. Iosivas had his best game of the season statistically in the passing game. And that 30-yard pass he got was on 3rd and 10. Bengals did a better job of converting on their third downs. If we look at the box score, Bengals were 4 of 11 on third downs, and I think most of those must have come in that second half. But Iosivas got the 30-yard catch and run. If I look at his overall statistics, Andre Iosivas, 5 catches, 82 yards on 7 targets, long of 30. He was more active in the game, in the passing game. Chase Brown was targeted often, 7 catches on 8 targets, but only 21 yards, long of 9. There were a couple plays where he actually lost yards. And I think that was a case where like I said, Jake Browning had 3 interceptions early in the game, 2 in the first half, and then 1 to begin the second half, where Jake Browning was throwing it, I don't want to say recklessly, but just not even close to being completed to the Bengals. And so I think for a brief moment in this game, he was maybe a little bit overly conservative, taking the checkdowns to Chase Brown for no yards because it seemed like a safer option than possibly throwing an interception. T. Higgins was a little bit quieter, only 3 catches for 22 yards on 7 targets, but he did have this third touchdown in the fourth game. After Yossi Vash converted that 30-yarder, they kept driving the ball, and they eventually converted a 2-yard touchdown pass to T. Higgins on the left side of the end zone. He got open, and that made it 35-24 Lions. 3 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. At that point, Bengals tried to do an onside kick, but they didn't recover it. So that obviously went back over to the Lions. They ran 3 plays and punted the ball away. They just tried to run about a minute off the clock, got it down to about the 2-minute warning. But they did a good job on this of pinning the Bengals deep on the punt team. This was one of the kind of the things that flies under the radar, kind of the hidden statistics part of the game. The punting for the Lions was so much better than for the Bengals. On this play specifically, I think might have been Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver. Who downed this? Oh, it was a fair catch by Charlie Jones. But Isaac Tesla, he was covering on the punt team. He's one of the receivers for the Lions. He had one play, it may have been earlier in the game, where he downed it right at, prevented it from going into the end zone, and the Lions downed it at like the Bengals 3-yard line or something. This was one where, because they had been so good at it, Charlie Jones fair caught it at the 7-yard line. The Bengals had to start from their own 7, and then the next play, they gave up a sack in the end zone for a safety. This was left guard Dylan Fairchild. He got beat by his man so bad, I don't think Fairchild even got a hand on this guy. It was, if they had been playing basketball, this guy put like a crossover move on Dylan Fairchild where like he faked outside and then cut back to the inside real quick, right past Fairchild. He didn't even get a chance to slow him down at all. Straight into Jake Browning for the safety. He's lucky he held on to the ball and the Lions didn't recover it for another touchdown, but that made it 37-24 at that point. And then there was some kind of weird play where Ryan Rico, he kicked it, he punted it, but I guess he didn't punt it far enough or something, because there was an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the Bengals that when the Lions got the ball, they got it all the way at the Cincinnati 20-yard line. So it was strange, but it didn't really matter. That was the end of the game anyway. But if we look at the average starting field position for both teams throughout this game, the Lions had 12 drives, Bengals had 12 drives. The Lions' average starting position was their own 44-yard line, almost to midfield. And in fact, the Lions had multiple drives that started in Bengals territory. Most of those were alpha interceptions. After those 3 interceptions, it wasn't like in some of those other games where the interceptions took place deep in the enemy territory. This one, there was one that the Lions took over at the Bengals 17-yard line. There was another one that started at the Bengals 45-yard line. Another drive started at the Bengals 28-yard line. Another drive started at the Bengals 40-yard line. And then the last drive, end of the game, started at the Bengals 10-yard line. Okay, so that, I don't understand how that penalty was so weird. They called it like half the distance to the goal from the Bengals 20-yard line. I don't know how. It must be some rule about if you have a safety penalty kick, they get to take over. I don't know. It was weird. I'll have to go back and check the rule book about how on the safety free kick, they got unsportsmanlike conduct and Lions got the ball at the Bengals 10-yard line after the kick. That was crazy. But anyway, Detroit average 44-yard line. Bengals, on the other hand, average starting position, their own 20-yard line. So out of those 12 drives, on average, the Bengals had almost 25 yards difference, 25 yards further to go every drive they started. So that's part of the reason why it's so much harder for them to score points, because they're having to go basically 50% longer to score any points than the other team. Bengals didn't have any drives that started in Lions territory. Bengals drive, and the kickoffs, it wasn't just like the punts that Detroit was doing a good job of. The kickoffs, Bengals and Charlie Jones weren't really able to get any good kick return. So the Bengals average start came 25, their own 25, their own 28, their 3, their own 19. Bengals started on their own 5, their 8, their 27, their 28, 27, 30, 37, 7. The best field position the Bengals had all day was their own 37-yard line, and that was 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. So not a great job in the field position game, not a great job in the first 3 quarters offensively. And defense, it's hard to say because Zac Taylor was like, oh, the defense did a great job. They gave us enough. But then as one of the reporters pointed out, they didn't do a great job on the opening drive of the game when the Lions just walked it all the way down the field to them without a whole lot of resistance from the Bengals, and they scored a touchdown and went down 7-0. That put them on the back foot just to start off the game. Zac Taylor always talks about how it's so much easier to play with a lead, and conversely, the Bengals were the first team not to score a touchdown on the first drive of the game against the Lions. And so that's one of the issues that the Lions and the Bengals have had. Bengals have given up, I think they gave up a field goal on one of the games, on the first drive of one of the games. But other than that, they have also given up a touchdown on the first drive of their games. And Zac Taylor, typically, when they asked him about that, he said, we got to get better at that. That's what Zac Taylor says about everything, and it's exhausting. They'll say, what about, the offense? Well, we got to get better at the offense. What about the running game? Well, we got to do a better job in the running game. What about Jake Browning and all the interceptions? Well, we got to do a better job of holding on to the football and not throwing interceptions. Yeah, right. You got to do a better job of everything because you lost, coach. We get it. They asked him, would Jake Browning be starting next week in Green Bay when they play the Packers? This is 3 losses in Jake Browning's first 3 starts for the Bengals. And obviously the questions are mounting. Hey, how long are you going to stick with this guy? Even during the game, some of the fans in Paycor Stadium were starting to get restless. The Boo Birds were coming out because Jake Browning has just thrown 3 interceptions. He's continuing to look terrible. The team was down 28-3 at that point. And then they showed Jake Browning warming up on the sidelines. And I was like, why is Jake Browning getting warmed up? They should be putting in the backup quarterback at this point. I was like, why isn't Brett Rippon getting warmed up instead of Jake Browning? But I guess you could say Jake Browning paid off that decision to leave him in the game by leading them to 3 straight touchdown drives in that fourth quarter. The only problem was the game was basically out of reach at that point, and they had already done too many negative things to lose the game to make it even realistic to have a chance to win the game. Although, in his press conference, Zac Taylor said he legitimately thought that they were going to win the game when they were down 35-24 and they did the onside kick. He's like, I thought we were going to recover the onside kick and win the game. But they were down by 11 points. And let me go back. how much time was left at that point. What did I say? 3 minutes? Yeah, 3 minutes left to go in the game. They're down by 11, and Zac Taylor's talking about he thought they were going to win the game. For that to have been possible, they would have to recover the onside kick, go down, score their 4th touchdown in a row, and also convert the 2-point conversion to get 8 points. Then they would have to do another onside kick and recover their 2nd onside kick in a row, and then go down and score for the 5th drive in a row, either scoring a field goal to tie it and take it into overtime or scoring a touchdown somehow. Obviously, none of that happened because they didn't even recover one onside kick, much less multiple onside kicks. So it's hard to take Zac Taylor seriously about what he thinks is going to happen because he's like, oh, I thought we were going to win the game. But he also says, like, I have total confidence in Jake Browning and we're going to get this thing turned around and we're going to be winning lots of games. There's still plenty of football left to play and we're going to be winning lots of games and we're going to be going to the playoffs and yada, yada, yada. I mean, like I said, I know that that's part of Zac Taylor's job is to be optimistic and hopeful and keep fans interested and paying attention to the team and thinking that there's still a chance, there's still hope. So he can't say, season's over, we're not very good, we don't have the resources and the players and whatever. I get that he has to say that they have a chance and all that stuff. But that's all very easy for him to say when he has 100% job security. He knows his job isn't in jeopardy no matter what happens. So he could say, oh, I feel really confident that we'll get things turned around and we'll be better and whatever. Because nothing's going to happen. There's no consequences for him at the end of the day. He can act like there are, and he could say, we're evaluating everything, and I don't actually believe any of that stuff. Today, in the press conference, Ben Baby from ESPN posed the question again of, would he consider giving up the play calling duties? Because he calls the offensive plays. They have an offensive coordinator who's supposed to help him with the schemes or whatever, but according to Zac Taylor, he's always said he uses all the information from all the different coaches in his decision-making process, but he's the one ultimately calling the play into the quarterback and deciding what play they're going to run. And after the game, Zac Taylor was saying the game was 100% on him. Put all the blame on him. You know, they were asking him, because obviously Jake Browning threw 3 interceptions. Are you going to stick by him? And he was like, oh, don't put it on Jake Browning. That's on me. Don't put it on anybody else but me. I take all the blame. You know, he was falling on the sword. Like I said, it doesn't matter because he's not going to get fired. He knows he's not going to lose his job over this loss. So it's easy for him to come out and say, oh, put all the blame on me because nothing's going to happen, right? So whatever. He wants all the blame on him. But Jake Browning even said, that's nice of Zach to say that, but it was all my fault for the most part. It has nothing to do with him. He didn't call Jake Browning throw an interception, but maybe they could have schemed up some better plays. There was one interception he threw to Mike Gesicki. It could have been intercepted by 2 guys, honestly. If the first guy didn't pick it off, another guy standing right there probably would have. And there weren't a lot of options for Jake Browning to go. There weren't really any good wide open guys for him to throw it to on that play anyway. So maybe Zac Taylor is saying, I could have given him some better choices to choose from that wouldn't have led to interceptions maybe, but there was the first interception Jake Browning threw. When you listen to him after the game, that's why I like recording these podcasts a little bit after the game, because if I had record immediately after the game, the way that it looked like Jake Browning completely missed, and Jamar Chase was running an out route to the left sideline, and it looked like Jake Browning left the ball too far inside where the defender was standing, and it made an easy interception for the Lions. after the game, Jake Browning said that he was trying to throw it inside because before the snap, the defender was more to the outside, and he thought that the defender was going to kind of stay outside, but Jamar Chase, the way he ran his route, he beat the defender to the outside, and that kind of surprised Jake Browning. So he had, according to him, intentionally threw the ball to the inside. So he was trying to throw it there, but it was just kind of a misread, misjudgment. And so I guess that's better because it's not like he was trying to throw it outside and he missed badly. It was more he threw it exactly where he was trying to throw it. It's just that it was a bad decision. I don't know which one is worse, bad decision or bad throw. You could say you could coach him to make a better decision, but you can't necessarily, it's not as easy to coach him to make a good throw. Hopefully that's the case because he did make some pretty good throws. He did make some awful throws, though, especially early in the game. And Daryl Moose Johnson, the Fox announcer in this game, was in total disgust with Jake Browning. He couldn't believe, he was in disbelief at how bad some of these throws were. Jake Browning was throwing into like triple coverage. There was one interception. I think he was trying to go deep to Jamar Chase where they were like, did his arm get hit or like did a big gust of wind come up or like what happened? Because the ball went like way up in the air, but it was way short. He only threw it probably like 45 yards in the air. It wasn't like a long pass, but he threw it way up in the air. So like the Lions are standing there like an outfielder in baseball waiting for this like high ball to come down to them, just waiting like a lollipop basically up in the air. Easy interception. The Bengals had no chance to really complete that pass. There was another pass he tried to throw deep to T. Higgins one-on-one with Rocky Sin down the field with no safety help. And instead of throwing the ball away from the defender more to the inside, Jake Browning left the ball way outside. Basically, he threw it to the Lions player instead of where T. Higgins could run away from the defender and catch it. So that one's broken up. Another one of those targets that T. Higgins wasn't able to bring down. But it just took too long for Jake Browning to, as they said, find a rhythm. All of a sudden, we found a rhythm in the fourth quarter. What they didn't mention was all the injuries that the Lions were having on defense at that same moment in the game. They were bringing in backups, one of whom was Trey Flowers, who was a Cincinnati Bengal a couple of years ago. He was matching up mostly on T. Higgins late in the game because he's a little bit of a bigger cornerback, but they were rotating in a number of guys. So, Bengals could say they were getting in a rhythm, but also they were able to take advantage of just not as good players on defense for the Lions at that time. And you could say the Lions, they're up 28-3, so it's natural for them to take their foot off the gas a little bit. You want to have that killer instinct and just crush the team all the way 60 minutes, all the way through the game. But it's probably a little bit natural to kind of let up a little bit. You're up 28-3, think you got the game wrapped up. They had to kind of hurry up and score that extra 9 points to get to 37 to put it out without doubt. But definitely it felt like giving Bengals fans a little bit of almost false hope of, oh, hey, if the entire game had gone like the fourth quarter, we would have had a chance. But it never really felt like the Bengals realistically had a chance, a actual chance in this game. After the opening kickoff, after that first drive, they were down 7-0. It got to 14-0. The closest they were ever to the Lions after that halftime was 11 points. That's as close as it got. And outside of a couple of Trey Hendrickson taking advantage of the left tackle, that's one thing I didn't mention was I didn't expect this, but the Lions left tackle, Taylor Decker, he did not play in this game. He's been battling through a shoulder injury, and he has not practiced during the week, but he's typically been able to play on Sundays. But This week, maybe it was, they figured they could probably take care of the Bengals and Jake Browning without this guy. So he may have kind of been taking the week off a little bit. Who knows? He said in his interview he's been dealing with chronic pain and going through the rehab and all that stuff. I haven't been following the Lions every single week to really know, but they seem to, I think the guy that they had replacing him was making his first start in the NFL. He definitely gave up a couple pressures to Trey Hendrickson, but it wasn't terrible. They gave up 4 sacks, which was a lot more than the Lions' offensive line had given up, but they weren't able to strip the ball out except for that one Trey Hendrickson play, and they didn't force any interceptions. Jared Goff did a good job of not putting the ball into harm's way like Jake Browning did. He played a much cleaner game and was able to get the ball to his playmakers, specifically Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. But the Bengals defense on a couple of those plays didn't necessarily make it easy on themselves because Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, was trying some different personnel groupings, some different formations, and he had a lot more defensive linemen on the field than he had been typically. He started off the first drive with 5 defensive linemen, like 3 defensive tackles and then 2 defensive ends, 2 linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 outside cornerbacks. Cam Taylor-Britt did not start in this game. He only played a fraction of the plays, about 40% or 30% of the defensive plays, but he was more of a sub when they went to their nickel packages. But for outside cornerback, it was Dax Hill and DJ Turner for the most part. And Dax Hill was one of the starters on outside cornerback before he got hurt last season. So he kind of made that return to the outside, and he has played better overall than Cam Taylor-Britt for sure. So that makes sense. DJ Turner had a nice pass breakup, at least one. And DJ Turner seems like he's good for at least one good pass breakup per game. So he's been making plays. That makes sense that those would be their starting outside cornerbacks. They did not play a whole lot of Josh Fig Newton in this game, surprisingly. It was a little bit more, like I said, linebacker rotation. Barrett Carter got some more snaps in this game. Oren Burks was playing a little bit more at linebacker. Demetrius Knight was taking his typical high amount of snaps, but Logan Wilson was out there for like 90% of the plays. He got a few breaks here and there, but not that much. We even saw McKinley Jackson getting his first action of the season in the 5th game, and he got in there a little bit. Looking at the snap counts, one of the only strange things I saw was Dalton Reisner had 1 snap in the entire game, and it was on that Jamar Chase touchdown. And I went back and looked to see what happened. The play before that, Dylan Fairchild, the left guard, kind of came up limping a little bit, and he must have gone to get checked out by the medical staff. Dalton Reisner went in for 1 play. They scored a touchdown, and then the next drive, Dylan Fairchild was back out at left guard. So that was something to watch. But according to Zac Taylor on Monday, no player had any kind of serious injury that will cause them to miss this upcoming game against the Green Bay Packers in Week 6. So that's mostly good news. We saw B.J. Hill go down at one point in the game, and he was limping off. And it was just sounded like he got his ankle rolled up on by one of his teammates, and he'll probably just be a little bit sore this week after that, but nothing serious for B.J. Hill. That was a little bit concerning because it looked like he tried to run off and then went down and was laying on the ground. So I was like, oh no, like, is it something serious? They went to commercial break, but luckily, no worse for the wear. B.J. Hill was able to come back and make some crucial plays in this game. So that was good to see. Nobody got seriously injured on either side of the ball. I think actually Terrion Arnold, the cornerback for the Lions, they showed him getting carted into the locker room, and he's going on to the injured reserve. I think maybe he has some kind of a shoulder injury he was dealing with. But really, it wasn't even a good story for the Bengals specifically, but if you wanted like a feel-good story for this game, David Montgomery was a local Cincinnatian who was coming back and playing his first football game in Cincinnati since he had been in high school. I forget where he went to college, maybe Iowa State, but he never played a game in Cincinnati when he was in college. And then so far, since he's been in the NFL, the Lions had not played a game in Cincinnati since he'd been there. So this is going to be the first time coming back home in front of his friends and family. And he also had a sister who was in a serious car accident about a year ago. So she was paralyzed from the neck down, and they showed her getting to meet him before the game, and they showed her in the stands, in the crowd, and kind of celebrating when he scored his touchdowns, a couple of touchdowns. So that was a nice moment to see, a local guy coming back to face his old hometown team and scoring multiple touchdowns in front of the family. So that was all great and heartwarming. It's too bad that, it was against the Bengals and it had to be a Lions player, but you take what you can get at some times. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the Lions fans definitely kind of put a damper on that whole Stripe the Jungle experience. We've seen in past years they've done a good job of dominating on those type of special wear all one color, whether it's white or orange or stripes or whatever it is. They've done a good job of the home crowd taking over. This was the first time that I can remember one of those instances where the away team made up so much of the crowd that the visual impact was not as striking as it had been. Like I say, there's probably 15 to 20% Lions fans in the crowd, and all that blue really kind of messed up the contrast between the orange and the black. And Zac Taylor took note of that after the game. He said he saw that, and he was talking about, he hopes that the crowd will be back and they'll be playing in front of sellout crowds like they are used to. I think it was still a sellout crowd. It was just that some of the Bengals fans had sold their tickets to Lions fans. There were still plenty of people there. It's just some of them were rooting for the other team. And from Mike Brown's perspective, what does he honestly care? They're paying money to come in. They're, drinking beer. They're buying concessions. They're still paying for the tickets, whether they're wearing blue or orange or whatever it is. I'm sure Mike Brown isn't really that concerned whether they're Lions fans or Bengals. Yes, you want to have the home crowd there on the home turf, home field advantage, all that stuff. But Mike Brown's just interested in making that green, baby. So whatever, you look at the games over in London, they've got fans coming in wearing all kinds of different teams that aren't even playing that day. Who is it? The Steelers played the Vikings, but you saw people wearing Chiefs jerseys and Giants jerseys and Cowboys jerseys and every team. You didn't see a lot of Bengals jerseys over there in London. It doesn't seem like the Bengals have totally taken off internationally. And, playing with Jake Browning and getting beat by double digits every week, they're probably not going to be attracting a lot of new international fans, which is a shame. This is a fun team, usually. But it's a lot more fun to win than lose. They asked Jamar Chase after the game, is football still fun or is it more frustrating at this point? And Jamar Chase said, it's always fun, but it's just more fun when you're winning instead of losing. Or I think he said it's not as much fun when you're losing. So I totally understand that. He said this was one of the first games since his rookie season that he scored multiple touchdowns and didn't celebrate, because when he scored his first touchdown, they were down 28-3, and that made it 28-10. So yeah, you're not really going to go crazy, or you probably shouldn't go too crazy celebrating a touchdown when you're still down by 18 points at that point. So it did kind of put a damper on things, and It was better than the previous 2 weeks. Obviously, they didn't get beat by 25. They didn't get beat by 38. It wasn't the worst loss in franchise history. It still wasn't competitive. Jake Browning throwing 3 interceptions and being the leading rusher with 31 yards. This was their highest rushing output with 85 yards, but they still got outgained on the ground by Detroit, who had 118. But the Bengals only attempted 16 rushes, and 4 of them were Jake Browning scrambles, where it was really a pass. So they really only attempted 12 runs in the entire game and 44 pass plays. So basically almost 4 times as many passes as runs for the Bengals. It's just way too far out of balance. I know that's what they're built to do with when they had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and this particular offensive line. They were just counting on passing every play. But it's hard to adapt, I know. But I've been saying this is the 3rd week in a row where it's okay, you can't play this pass all the time, pass 80% of the plays now that Joe Burrow is out. You have to change it because obviously Jake Browning throwing 40 times a game is a recipe for disaster. Now, the Bengals, they did have over 300 yards of offense in this one, a little bit better, but most of that came in garbage time when the Lions were kind of just playing like a prevent defense. So kind of garbage time statistics, hard to give the Bengals too much credit for that. But, there was a scary statistic at one moment in the game where not only was Jamar Chase the leading receiver, he was also the leading tackler because on all 3 of those interceptions, he made a solo tackle. And that he ended up tied for 2nd on the team in solo tackles. So I was joking. We may have to kind of put Jamar Chase in that Travis Hunter, have him play a little bit of safety instead of Geno Stone, who missed a number of tackles. I think there was one specifically where who scored that last touchdown? I think it was it Gibbs who scored the last touchdown? Let me look real quick. But whoever it was, it wasn't the last touchdown. It was the Lions' first touchdown of the second half. Came in the third quarter on a 20-yard touchdown pass. It was just a swing pass out to Jahmyr Gibbs, who, I know it's hard. He faked out Logan Wilson. He faked out Geno Stone. And he would probably fake me out too. But those guys are professional football players, and I'm not. So it was disappointing, the effort out of Geno Stone on this touchdown and the Bengals defense, because he just dragged everybody into the end zone. It was not the most physical Bengals defense. And like I said, maybe that was when they were getting tired. I don't know what the story was, but there was a few too many plays where it looked like the Bengals had him stopped and they should have tackled him. And then the Lions picked up 5 or 10 more yards after that and picked up a first down or a touchdown in this case. I would like to see a little bit more fight out of that Bengals defense, but it's hard to say which unit is to blame. And really, it's not all on the offense. It's not all on the defense. It's a combination of offense, defense, and special teams. The special teams didn't do a good job of putting the Lions in negative territory where they would be up with their back up against the wall. The Lions all day had great field position. So the Bengals defense was constantly under stress, constantly under pressure, being threatened by the Lions on offense. And then vice versa, the Bengals were already always backed up against their own goal line with nowhere to go, and it made everything difficult. So just a complete team-wide beatdown, unfortunately. And the Lions are a good team. That's their 4th win in a row. And these opponents for the Bengals have been good playoff caliber teams who are going to be competing at the end of the year for the Super Bowl. But if the Bengals want to, the Bengals and Zac Taylor are still talking about, hey, we've got 2 wins and we're still in the race to win this division. We're still in the playoff hunt. Everything's still in front of us. We still got plenty of football left to play. True, but to do that, you're going to have to beat better teams than the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were both tied last season for the worst record in the NFL. So 2 of the worst teams in the NFL are the 2 teams that the Bengals beat. If they want to, seriously have a chance, they'll have to beat somebody who's conceivably going to have some kind of a winning record. That next opportunity is going to come against the Green Bay Packers this upcoming Sunday. But we'll have plenty of time to recap, or preview, I should say. Plenty of time to preview the Green Bay Packers on the next episode. But this 3rd loss in a row, there have been some rumblings. Zac Taylor said when they asked, are you going to consider a quarterback change? Is Jake Browning still going to be the starting quarterback in Green Bay? Zac Taylor just said, we'll see. So he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. It wasn't like last week where he said he has unwavering 100% total confidence in Jake Browning. He's our guy. It wasn't that. So a change of tone is opening the door for a potential change. And we don't know whether or not they're considering a trade because, like I said, they've already got 3 quarterbacks on the roster. We don't know what any of them has looked like in practice. If they've looked really good and they're mastering the offense, they may give one of these other guys a chance to start next game instead of Jake Browning. But if they didn't bench Jake Browning after that 3rd interception, I don't know what it would take to bench him. Like, how many interceptions does Jake Browning have to throw in a game to get benched? Is it 4? Is it 5? There's got to be some number of bad passes Jake Browning is going to throw before they have to pull him out and pull the cord on this whole experiment. And was it enough what he did at the end of the game? They almost had 200. They had over 300 yards of offense in the game. The Bengals, almost 200 of that came in the 4th quarter when the game was pretty much out of hand. So they really didn't get much accomplished when it mattered. And Zac Taylor has constantly repeated, that's my fault. That the lack of offensive production is on me. I got to do a better job. We've all got to be better. Yada, yada, yada. I don't know if anything has really changed. Definitely the results haven't changed, but Zac Taylor was adamant he's not giving up play calling duties. He's clinging to that. And it was really the same reason that he gave when Brian Callahan was the offensive coordinator. He's like, oh, we all make the decision together. So according to him, it wouldn't really make any difference if Dan Pitcher called the plays or Justin Riscotti or any of the other, Troy Walters, any of the other offensive coaches. And Zac Taylor doesn't want that because if one of those responsibilities is taken away from him, he'll feel like he has, a lack of control. And honestly, that's probably one of his strengths. People constantly ask him to give up play calling, but then what else is he going to do? We already know he doesn't know anything about defense at all. He doesn't know anything about special teams at all. So the idea that he's going to be kind of the overall overseer, leader of men, which I think he's terrible at. People always say, oh, the players love Zac Taylor. I think that's just because he's Mr. Nice Guy and he's not, up in their face, screaming at them, being very demanding. He's like, oh, hey, you okay? You need a break? You need to get some water? Don't go too hard, guys. Take it easy. So he's not riding their ass, really pounding them into the dirt. He's very, sensitive to their needs and all that kind of stuff. So he's their best buddy. Of course, the players are going to say that they like him. But the players also like winning. So it's going to, how loyal are they if they're losing games. That's going to be one of the things we'll have to see. How loyal are the Bengals and this coaching staff to Jake Browning? They're talking about how he's their guy. He's been in this program forever. They kept him around since 2022, I want to say. He's been in this program for a number of years, and they've invested in him. I get that. But if the results aren't there, it's a results-driven business. Either they got to make a change at quarterback, or they're going to make a change at coach. Or, that's what they should do. But they're not going to make a change at coach, so they'll probably make a change at quarterback just to keep the fans happy. I don't think that fans would actually stop coming to the games. But if they keep losing, they've got a bunch of home games coming up. After the Packers, then they've got 3 straight home games. And right now they're 2-3. If they come back and they're 2-4, I'm sure the fans will still come to the game. But after a couple more losses, let's say they get to 2-6, some of the attendance might start to dip, or you'll definitely have more of the away team fans in the crowd, which the Bengals don't want either. But there have been seasons where, you get towards the end of December when it's, the Bengals, if they've got like 4 wins or something like that, and it's going to be really cold. There have been games with Zac Taylor as the coach where the stadium was only like half empty, especially with Marvin Lewis and his last season with Bengals head coach. There was like ghost town games. Bengals don't want that, obviously. That's going to cost them money. And the Bengals are very financially motivated. So whatever it's going to do to keep the fans happy. But at the same time, they don't want to fire Zac Taylor because he's under contract until 2026. So they got to keep him, but at the same time, keep the fans. It's kind of a tricky dance they got to do. But the thing is, that's the number one priority, unfortunately. I don't really think it's winning football games. It's giving them the appearance that they're trying so that they can keep making money off of the fans. That's my cynical view of things, I know. But the other thing is, when they talk about who's going to play and who's not, Orlando Brown, they don't really have any better options at tackle. But if they did, they probably wouldn't consider benching Orlando Brown Jr. anyway, because he's like one of the top 5 highest paid players on the team. Same thing with Logan Wilson. He's one of the top paid players on the Bengals. So even if he's not really playing that well this season, he's going to be on the field because the Bengals want to get their money's worth. Bengals are opening up next game as 14.5-point underdogs, which is worse than what they were against the Lions. They were 10.5-point underdogs at home to the Lions, and they didn't even manage to cover that spread. This isn't a gambling podcast. I don't bet, but going away to the Packers, 14.5 in the NFL, it sounds kind of high, but given the way the Bengals have been playing lately, can't put anything past them at this point. So we'll do a full recap, I keep saying recap. It's a full preview of Green Bay on the next episode. But if you've listened so far, thank you so much. Go ahead and leave me your comments. Send me an email, bengalbitespodcast@gmail.com. What do you think? How's the rest of the season going to turn out? Should they bench Jake Browning? Who should they go to? Should they trade for another quarterback? How can I make this podcast better? Do you think there should be a video element to this podcast? Because I am putting these up on YouTube, but I would rather leave it as audio only so you can just not have to be looking all the time. You can kind of have it on the background and listen and while you're doing whatever. If it's a video podcast where I'm like breaking down the film and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really make as much sense unless you're watching, which is not as convenient. So that's why this is an audio only format, and because I'm lazy and I don't want to do all the video, that would take a lot more time. So audio only. On that note, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.